Good afternoon, all. This is Gregor Jean-Louis with the Haitian American Cuban Network channel, which I'm about to get plugged in, and waiting for my guests to show up. Tonight we'll be talking about polygamy, and things of that nature. So as she's showing up, I'm getting my questions ready. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about life as a polygamist. I have my questions ready, as you can see, and waiting for Chrissy to pop up. So, sorry, we're having all technical difficulties, so give me a second. Alright, give me 1 second. We're having all technical difficulties.
Hey.
Chrissy, go to the video.
Yeah, I'm at the video. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. I just have no idea how to join it.
Okay, write me a message.
Huh?
Write a message.
Like where though? There's no.
You gotta make it like a full screen.
I'm looking at. Okay. So video, full screen. Okay, now I can see. I had to turn my phone. I had it like the big way, but I had to turn it like the other way. So I can message, but I don't see like an option to. There it is. Okay, I have to send a request to join. I see it. It just didn't show the other way. I had to turn my phone. Okay. Join.
Sure, ma'am. Okay.
Alright. 1 second, turn off the lights outside.
Just fixing my setup a bit.
Everything's set up. Alright, good afternoon, all. This is Gregor Jean-Louis with Christy June Dyer.
Okay.
And tonight's video will be when we talk about polygamy. And normally, before we get into this video, I do videos with Michelle, but since I want to get into the habit of doing interviews with new people, Michelle is still my co-host, forever be my co-host. Actually, within a week's time, we'll do a post-interview video on this video. So Michelle has gone nowhere. I'm just decided to do a video with Christy on this great topic. So without further ado, Chrissy, the floor is yours.
I'm having a weird here. So I'm getting your like talking after when you've talked. So I'm trying to fix it.
Oh, probably.
Sounds. There's a really big sound delay.
You're sideways.
I know. There's like a huge.
So give me a second, guys, and I'll try to bring it back on.
Okay. I'm hoping that that's fixed the delay.
All right, no problem.
There was a wicked delay. So I was like hearing everything way after it happened.
Oh.
I don't think there's a delay anymore though, so that's great. Hi, I'm Christy. Basically here to just answer questions that Gregor might have or that anybody adds to the comments or discussion. We have some planned questions, but of course anything that comes up organically we can cover as well. So have at it, Gregor.
All right. Let me give you guys a little background for the questions. I met Chrissy about 8 to 10 years ago, before a friend's wedding. I actually nearly got into fisticuffs with her first husband because I didn't know she was polygamous. And 6 months down the line, Chrissy opened up, and I hate to use the LGBTQ term, but came out of the closet as a polygamist. I kind of grappled with that a little bit. And when I opened the channel with Michelle, we had a channel for about 2 years. I've been looking to do interviews. And I always wanted to talk to Christy about life as polygamous, because I'm not going to lie to you. My pastors told me this is a sin. It's like LGBT community is a sin, murder is a sin, stealing is a sin, sleeping with thy neighbor's wife is also a sin. But yet we're okay with having the LGBT community as a culture thing now. But when it comes to polygamy, it's still wrong. So I kind of grapple with that. And like I said, I always wanted to talk about it. I'm not going to lie to you guys first. I know I'm going on a tangent, but before this interview came about, I'm not going to lie to you. I was kind of against it at first. But when I started living in Haiti, I saw a lot of married men with a bunch of side women, side chicks, what have you.
Not good.
I'm like, oh, if this is a thing in Haiti, why isn't this a thing in the States? So I kind of got my brain reeling, saw you on Facebook again, and talked about it for a few weeks. Decided to do an interview, and here we are.
Here we are. But
all right. So first question: How do you define polygamy, and what does it mean to you personally?
So polygamy is a umbrella term for any plural relationship. So any relationship with more than two people falls under this giant, umbrella of polygamy. For me personally, what it means is certainly any of those things, but what I lived in and what I am open to, not actively seeking, but open to, is marital polygamy. So a committed, closed relationship with one or more other females other than myself married to my husband. That is the format that I would look for. I don't necessarily recommend it to everyone. And I also know that there are going to be people who have completely, you know, different formats that they want. And I think that some of those are acceptable as well. And I wouldn't pass judgment on any of those other formats. But what I lived in was a closed, Christian-based plural marriage. I had one sister wife for like a few years. And then now I'm in a monogamous marriage, but I'm open to the possibility of polygamy for the right person. And then in terms of like what it means to me would probably be what the value is that it contributes to my life. So ideally, it would be for family building purposes, whether that means expanding your family and having, you know, additional mother for, you know, children to be raised in the family, whether that means all working together for goals, businesses, assets, building homes together. I mean, kind of the opportunities become endless as you unlock the potential of every individual. It's sort of, I think of like 3 heads are better than 2. People say 2 heads are better than 1. In theory, 3 heads would be better than 2 if it's the right people. And I think that's a huge key, is it being the right combination of individuals that work well together. So that is what polygamy means to me.
How does your husband feel about it?
So when I met my husband, he really knew nothing about plural marriage at all. I was the one who brought it up to him, and he was at first like, "What? Are you crazy? Don't you want to like stab another chick if she looks at me?" But as he realized that I was actually in fact serious about it, and that this was something I had actually done before in my life, he became open to the idea, you know, not so much as like oh yeah, I get to have 2 chicks. Like, that's a lot of work. I think a lot of men initially, that's what goes to your head. Like, oh, 2 wives, who wouldn't love that? But really, truly, that's caring for the emotional, physical, and personal needs of 2 people instead of just one. Like, I think it's a lot of work. So for him, it was more of other opportunities that it unlocked for me, you know, me having the bond of a sister type relationship in my home, in my family, and sort of almost like a challenge. He saw that my first plural marriage didn't work. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. It was not fulfilling in the ways that I had hoped that it would be. And he kind of said, you know what? I could do this. You know, I could do this and do it the right way and have it be what you always wanted it to be, if we ever found the right person. So that's why I say, like, we're open to it if we were to meet the right individual, but it's just not something that we're actively seeking, because I think that's something that's really hard to find.
No problem. In this lifestyle, question, can I call it a lifestyle, or should I call it polygamy?
I mean, I think it's certainly a lifestyle choice. It's not a requirement. It's not like someone who is trans and they feel that they are whatever gender they identify as, or they need to be called that thing because that is so integral to their identity. I think being a polygamist isn't necessarily essential to your identity. It's just part of your marital or relationship structure. The same as somebody who chooses to be a bachelor. He doesn't need to be identified as that bachelor over there. So I think lifestyle is absolutely an appropriate term.
No problem. Number two, in this lifestyle, I'm aware there are many motivations and formats. In your life, is plural marriage a religion, or I miswrote that actually. Is this more of a religious base, or is it mostly a cultural or family type of thing?
Yeah. So I'm somewhere in the middle. I am a believer in God, but my choice to be a polygamist has nothing to do with God. That is to say, I don't believe it is a requirement to be a polygamist, to be a Christian, or to be a Mormon, or to be a Muslim. There is one scripture, which I'll talk about a little later, that actually says that polygamy is required, but that is not a scripture that is part of my religion. It's not in the Christian Bible. It's not in the Jewish Torah, which obviously is foundational to Christianity. So the decision to be a polygamist is not based in religion. I believe that the Bible allows for 3 different formats for life. One is singledom, and one is monogamy, and one is polygamy. And the key is finding the path that is God's path for you, or the correct path for your life, not anybody else's, or defining anyone else's. So I am a Christian, but my decision to be a polygamist is not faith-based because it's not required by my religion. It's allowed by my religion, but it's not required. So, and I would say it's certainly a more social, cultural decision. Me wanting to have the camaraderie of a sister wife, me wanting to have that close family bond of 3 adults in the family instead of 2, of having more adults for my children, having more freedom for each individual spouse, more needs met for each spouse. So it's more of a social, cultural decision for me.
Before I go any further, I forgot to mention this. For those watching, if you're below the age of 13, please have your parents watch this entire video before you watch this video. Because I'm not trying to change your views, change your religion, change your belief if you're under the age of 13. This is not for someone who's not mature enough to understand this conversation.
Agreed.
You have been warned, because there's some questions I have here. I just realized forgot to mention this earlier, that are not for the faint of heart, and might confuse people who are not in the right mindset. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you have to be maturely minded to take it all in, for sure.
And this is the first time I'm actually saying this, actually. From my research, I found that polygamy is not traditional marriage. This is number 3. From my research, I found that polygamy is not a traditional marriage, as in one man and one woman. How would you recommend someone going about discussing this family design with their partner? I think we had this question twice, but go on.
Okay,
yeah.
So I'm going to say that the first thing that's kind of important here, and I hope that this doesn't come off as challenging you in any way, Gregor, but kind of a retort, that I would argue that not only is polygamy not non-traditional, but it is the most traditional format for marriage, more traditional than monogamy or one man, one woman. If we look back historically, over time, polygamy has been practiced since basically the dawn of humankind. So at least a few thousand years, depending whose numbers we're using. If we're using biblical numbers, at least a few thousand years. If we're using evolutionist numbers, thousands and thousands and thousands of years, polygamy has been practiced. So it is incredibly traditional, and it is part of the American story, and it's part of the human story. It's just been kind of covered up by people who don't want to know about it and don't want to include it as part of the human story. If we look at not just historically, going all the way back to Neanderthals, obviously being nomadic, obviously their goal was procreation. They were almost entirely driven by that goal: food, sex, and safety. Of course they were polygamists. There were no monogamous marriages. At the start of humanity. None. Everyone was polygamous, and everybody was basically getting it on to propagate the species. So going forward, when we look at scriptures from all different religions, we find looking at Christianity is probably the most complex to look at because we have tons of examples of polygamists in the Bible in the Old Testament. And we've got all of these examples of, Abraham, his wife Sarah couldn't have a child. So she brought her handmaid, so basically her helper. Servant is the right word. Slave is not. Servant is the right word. A handmaid was the servant that was for the woman of the house. And she brought her to Abraham and said, hey, I haven't had any kids. And here she is, have Hagar, have children with her. And he did. And we don't see any condemnation from God for that. There are also scriptures in the Bible on how to treat your wife if you have more than one wife, that you cannot reduce the raiment, which is like food and goods, the sexual rights, or how you treat your first wife if you take a second. So God's never going to give us scriptures about something that he forbids, right? But he's just given us law, Levitical law, saying this is how you treat your second wife compared to your first wife. So that tells us this is something maybe God's not advocating, but he's certainly permitting it, right? Then we see King Solomon, 300 wives, 700 concubines. Never one singular condemnation from God for any of those wives or concubines. And we see over and over when there is a sin, the sin in Sodom and Gomorrah, the sin on earth, whenever we see murders and things like that in the Bible, God is super clear about what's wrong. When man does something wrong, God goes, hey, no, not allowed. That's a sin. Well, we never see him say that about polygamy to any of the polygamous patriarchs in the Old Testament. So that's very clear to me that it wasn't condemned by God. So then we have David, and David, there are scriptures about him gaining wives from other kings as he took over other areas. And there are scriptures saying he was a man after God's heart. There's never a scripture saying that David was wrong for having more than one wife. It wasn't until he married Bathsheba that we ever see anything about him doing anything wrong. And the sin there was that Bathsheba was actually married, and he sent her husband, Uriah the Hittite, into war so that he would die, so that he could then have Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. So that was his sin. The sin was never polygamy itself. It was sending Uriah to be killed, basically, so that he could have his wife. It was wife stealing, which obviously that's sin. And that was like kind of where he fell from God's grace, was when that happened. But never was it the polygamy. So then we have Christians who say, well, that was all the Old Testament. That's not in the New Testament. But we still don't see polygamy condemned in the New Testament. There is no scripture in the Bible, cover to cover, that says you can't be a polygamist. And Jesus himself said, I come to fulfill the law, not to change it. So without there being something specific banning polygamy in the New Testament, it's clear here, right, that it's allowed in Christianity. And don't defer on my expertise. I would like to use who I think is the real expert, and I think one of the greatest Christian minds, Christian leaders of all time, and that is Martin Luther. His statement on polygamy was such, this is a quote, I confess I cannot forbid a person to marry several wives, for it does not contradict the scripture. If a man wishes to marry more than one wife, he should be asked whether he is satisfied in his conscience that he may do so in accordance with the word of God. In such case, the civil authority has nothing to do in the matter. It's basically saying, if you feel you're allowed by God to have more than one wife, if your conscience is clear, I can't forbid you from it because there is nothing in the scripture that says you're not allowed to have more than one wife. And Martin Luther was right about that. In fact, the real reason that polygamy was abandoned in Christianity, because it was actually widely practiced. Tons of Christian tribes still had polygamy. Tons of them, you know. Men had multiple women in their tents. Like, it was a normal thing. And it was actually it was the Catholic Church that abandoned polygamy officially on the books. It was around the 11th century, Pope Benedict VIII, and then later in that century, Pope Gregory VII wanted it to be abandoned for moral reasons, that they believed it was a moral sin. And kind of the darker undertone was that was the same time that they banned priests from having wives. And their motivation there was money. They wanted to inherit all of the belongings and land of their priests when their priest passed away, not children or wives. So that's the real reason your priest can't get married, because some pope said so. And that's the real reason that in the modern world that Christianity does not acknowledge polygamy, is because a Catholic pope basically banned it. And I'm not a Catholic, so that's part of why I don't listen to that. Because I realize that action is kind of what bled over into all of Christianity over time, moving away from polygamy. And then, you know, it's a lot simpler in other religions. They really spell it out for us. I'm not an expert in the Quran. So verse 4:3 of the Quran states you may marry up to 4 women if you can deal with them justly and fairly. And then in Doctrine and Covenants 132 in the Book of Mormon, it states that plural marriage was an eternal and everlasting covenant. And that's actually the religion that believes it's essential. So you can be saved and not be a polygamist, but if you wanted to get to the highest level of heaven and be a Mormon, they actually require you to be a polygamist. I mean, that's what the scripture itself says. They've even moved away from it because they couldn't get statehood back in 1890 without abandoning polygamy. So on the books, they abandoned polygamy, but all the leaders were still polygamists and still had multiple wives. So that's kind of interesting there. And then West Africa, South Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa all still practice polygamy widely. It's actually legal on the books. You can go to the courthouse, get married, have multiple wives in the majority of African countries. It's most of them, because of Muslim influence, you can only have up to 4 wives. Although most tribes, it's way more than that when they're tribal, because they don't actually get legal marriages. They're just married. And sometimes you have 2 or 3 men in a village and there's 30 women. So, and they're all having kids. So those are all polygamous setups. Again, super traditional life. There are also a lot of Asian tribes that have for thousands of years practiced polygamy. So my first kind of side note there is, I think that actually polygamy is the most traditional way of living. And then in terms of talking to a partner about polygamy, I think that's where things get a little bit dicey. I think that any time that you have to convince someone to do something, that is coercion. So, and I believe that coercion is abuse. I don't think anyone should be coerced or pressured into anything ever for any reason. So I would say if I were to talk to a partner about it, it's something that should be heartfelt. It's something that you want to show them. If you're talking to them about it from a religious stance, I would say share with them the scriptures. If you are talking to them from a social stance, I would say tell them how it could benefit their lives and how it's going to help them and help you, and negotiate the waters of how you want to do things and how you'd still treat them the right way, and why it would be in their best interest. And then I would say you have to kind of sit back and wait for them to be okay with that. And if they're not, then you shouldn't pursue polygamy. I don't believe anyone who's made a vow of monogamy to their spouse should ever go back on that and pressure them into polygamy.
No problem. All right, number 4. Is polygamy or the belief of plural marriage based on a cult or cult thinking? And the reason I brought that one up because in high school, and I don't remember what the group was called. You might have heard this back in the 1970s. A cult.
I know all the cults.
The one with
I know all the cults, Gregor.
The one with the
David
poison
Koresh, Jim Jones.
That one.
Warren Jeffs, all of them. I know all of them. And a lot of cults do practice polygamy. Yes. Obviously, they're not doing it under any sort of just blanket. It's cult leaders doing what cult leaders do best, which is take your money, your rights, and anything else they can take, including your women. In some of those communes or cults, some of those women were married to other men and just being taken by the cult leader for them to do whatever they wanted. Jim Jones did that. David Koresh did that. Charles Manson. I mean, so anytime you look at a cult, you're going to see abuse. And I would argue that anything where one man or one individual can make decisions that affect a large group of people, and they can make them arbitrarily at any time. Anytime that happens, it's a cult. So that is why I have personally distanced myself from both Catholicism and Mormondom, because they're both led by one man who can arbitrarily make decisions about your life. That, I believe, is cultism. And of course, I believe is wrong. And there have been a lot of abuses, even against children, that occurred on a polygamous cult in Utah. That was Warren Jeffs. And then another compound in Texas where like 500 children were taken away in 2007. There were 13-year-olds who were pregnant. 12, 13, 14-year-old girls married to 60, 70-year-old men. So that's part of why I'm an advocate for the decriminalization and legalization of polygamy, because then when it's legal and decriminalized, then we can actually regulate these people. Then they can't just go hide and marry little girls and human traffic them to different states. So yes, polygamy has been associated with cults, because cult leaders like to take things from you. But individual polygamy, meaning an individual person practicing polygamy, has, in my opinion, nothing to do with cult polygamy or any type of cultism. And I would argue even that some polygamous churches, because there are polygamous churches and there are polygamous groups that are biblically based, I would say those that are not led by one man are not cults either, because they're led by a community that makes decisions. Centennial Park in Utah is a community like that. They're polygamous, but multiple people make decisions for the community, not just one person. And the UAB is the same. They have a board of individuals who make decisions for the community, and they are not associated with the abuses that the FLDS community and Warren Jeffs committed. So I think that individual polygamy can be, completely moral and not associated with any abuse or cult behaviors, and so can religious polygamy. But of course, when you cross into like one leader who's, forcing people to do things, then of course it's cult polygamy, and that is a no-no.
Yeah, and also one thing I want to mention to the audience, that if you watch me personally, I love crime dramas, Law and Order, CSI.
Mm-hmm.
I can watch all these CSI episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna say every episode, but once in a blue moon or every 2 or 3 years, you're gonna find an episode on cults and they're having multiple wives, or and it was an SVU episode where the cult leader got a 12 or 13-year-old girl pregnant. So people who are not familiar with polygamy or the polygamy plural marriage lifestyle, they see these episodes or these TV shows and they see that, oh, that's a negative stuff. I want no part of it.
Yeah, it gets associated with gross things, and it sucks. Like, I hate it. That's part of why I want those kind of people. I want penalized. I want jailed. I want, you know, like, it's not okay.
Case in point, a guy who just put in jail just a few months ago, R. Kelly, who legitimately went after kids at high school. Said, oh, she's hot, so he went after her.
But we could look at, you know, I mean, they're a good example of a not sinful or not cultish or not abusive person who's famous would be like Will Smith. He and his wife have had plural relationships, not a plural marriage, but plural relationships. And, you know, they're not abusive in those actions. So I think it's mostly the individual. It's sad that now polygamists that aren't doing those kinds of things are associated with those kinds of things. I hate it. But yeah, I would say it's left kind of on the individual to act ethically and morally, just like the individuals in monogamy. If we took every sin that a monogamist ever did and associated it with monogamy, think of all the sins we would associate with monogamy. People are only doing like that with polygamists because they're able to go like, ooh, they're polygamists, they're different. But if we went home murders associated with monogamy, look how many serial killers were monogamists. You know what I mean? So it's really, people are associating a bad thing with your lifestyle, but really the bad thing, it's just bad people do bad things, whether they're monogamous or polygamous or single.
Number 5, is plural marriages always formatted as one husband with multiple wives, or are there other setups?
So I gave myself like a little graph here. Originally, I was talking about the umbrella of polygamy. That's like the umbrella for relationships with multiple partners. And there's like a bunch of things that come out underneath that. And yes, there are a lot of different formats. When we're talking about non-marital polygamy, we've got polyamory, which includes swinging, partner swapping, revolving door, where you have what they call a nesting partner. That's like a person you live with, but basically you can sleep around with whoever you want. Open relationships, all of those things would be considered polyamory. I do not advocate for those things. I don't judge people who have those things because I think that they know themselves better than I do and they know what's better for them. But for me, for my emotional stability and my emotional needs, like, I can't do the revolving door. And then underneath, like, non-religious, non-marital relationships, there's also polyfidelitous triads, quads, etc. So polyfidelitous would mean poly, but also with fidelity. So you're in a closed relationship with however many individuals. So sometimes it'll be a quad, which is like 4 people. It could be 3 men and a woman, could be 3 women and a man, could be 2 couples who have a closed relationship with one another. Again, there's too much going on there for me. I couldn't do it. No judgment to anybody who does, but it's just not my scene. But I don't, especially because those are safe and closed relationships, I certainly wouldn't judge anyone who practices polygamy in that way. And then under marital polygamy, you have polygyny, which is the actual term for one man and multiple wives. Could be 2, could be 4, could be 8, could be 30. I do not advocate for 30. I do not advocate for 8. I advocate for however many a person can responsibly care for their needs, which I think is probably a lot less than 8 and certainly a lot less than 30. And then polyandry is the term for a woman with multiple husbands. It's certainly not as common. I think most women are like, more than one man, that's a lot of work. And I think that most women thrive better in polygyny just because they crave the sisterhood aspect of having a sister wife. Whereas, like, what is another man going to do for me that my husband doesn't do? Like, I'm very satisfied with my husband, and there really isn't anything that I feel like another man could bring to the table. Honestly, it would just be another stressor. Whereas a woman, because she is a woman, she's going to have different interests than my husband and different things she would want to do with me that are like related to being a woman. I could gain some type of fulfillment from. I just don't think I would get anything out of another man in my life, and I would not enjoy that at all. And I think a lot of women feel the way that I do. They wouldn't want to be with more than one man. However, there are women that do, and more power to them if they can handle it. And now we're seeing it a bit more as polygamy is being talked about more, and there are shows about it. They've done a couple short shows on women who have multiple husbands. So it certainly exists. And there is a traditional polyandrous community as well. There is an Asiatic community that is tribal. I do forget the name, forgive me, but they just had an extreme shortage of women in their community. So the women do have multiple husbands there. So it happens, just not as commonly.
All right. Number 6. This is probably, I can see this. I'll answer this one after you answer it. Do you feel polygamy, specifically one man with plural wives, is, can I pronounce this word, misogynistic or anti-woman?
Anti-woman. So I think that a lot of women, like I said, like the gut reaction is like, well, I don't get to be with other men. Like, why don't you get to be with other women? Or why do you get to be with other women if I don't get to be with other men? So it's really easy to look at it and feel as though it is misogynistic or anti-woman. But I think a deeper dig into modern polygamy, meaning not cults, not like far traditional polygamy where women stay home all the time, but modernly in this time, I think that polygamy can be incredibly pro-women, even in a polygynous marriage where there is one man and multiple women. I think it allows much more freedom for a woman. If you have a mom at home, you can be out pursuing your career. You can be out getting an education. Again, 3 heads are better than 2. It's just a numbers game at this point. You just have more opportunities because you have the help. How many times do I hear a woman go, I'd love to be home with my kids, but I have to work. Or I feel like I'm not good enough with my kids because I'm not there enough. Or my kids aren't getting what they deserve because they don't have a mom at home. Or I feel guilty for wanting to pursue my career. And the other is true. How many moms that want to stay home or do stay home and then feel bad that they're not bringing in money or that their family is struggling financially? I think polygamy is an answer that lets women have it all. Lets women have a stay-at-home mom that's able to be with their kids, and a woman who can pursue a career if she wants to, and can get more education if she wants to, and can take time out to read a book in the bathtub if she wants to. I think women's lives become less cumbersome and less overloaded with work inside of polygamy. So I actually think polygamy is incredibly pro-woman and feminist. It's just a matter of perspective. And I would say it's a matter of the quality of the man who is in that marriage. Is he pro-woman? Does he advocate for his wives to have what they need, to go out and have their educations, careers, to have the time with their kids that they want? Is he supporting them as well? If that is there, I think polygamy is very pro-woman.
And one reason I would say misogynistic is the word I'm looking for.
Misogynistic.
I lived in Haiti from 2017 as an adult, 2017
Yeah.
2019. And a lot of the men who are well off or middle class in Haiti, which is probably like 9% of the country, would have a wife at home, or one or two side pieces on the side.
Yeah, mistresses. I mean, Americans do that too. They're just more slick about it. I have an aunt who, her husband had a whole mistress that he got pregnant and put up in an apartment down the road. So, I mean, it happens. And I was married to a man who was half Colombian, who his cousins, who were all married, planned a trip to Colombia every summer to cheat on their wives. So cheating isn't new. Having mistresses isn't new. Men do it. Men are gonna do it. That's another reason why I advocate for polygamy. Wait, I get to choose the woman? Oh, wait, she gets to help me with my kids too? Oh, she's gonna cook some dinner some nights? I'd rather that than my husband running out to whatever hole down the road and taking time from my kids. I mean, really. And I've been there. I've lived that.
I won't say this woman's name, and I won't say how I know this woman. So I'm going to say Sally Sue. All right?
Okay.
Okay, she was dating a guy I know named Rick. Case in point, Rick is a fake name. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
We're having an event at my place in Haiti. We're surrounded by four women. My head leaned back like this. I'm borderline falling asleep during this conversation. All right? And I know Rick grew up with my dad. So I know Rick 110%. And she tells this group of women that women should learn to share their husbands. And,
Nice.
quote, her words, not mine, I'm glad to be called a mistress, end quote. Because women should learn to share. I looked up and I was like, wasn't that about me again?
Yeah, no. Because you know what? A mistress is not a wife. So, no, wives don't need to share their husbands with mistresses. I think wives could be benefited by sharing their husband with another wife, another person who contributes to their home, that helps them, that helps their kids, that is a friend to them, that is a confidant to them, that is a champion for them. I think women can benefit from that. But women are not benefiting from the hoe down the street. They are not. Because the mistress does not care. Huh?
AKA Sally Sue down the street.
That's right. Like the wife is not benefited by the mistress, because the mistress ultimately has no investment in the family and helping them and helping they just want to take the husband. Let's be real. They just, not good.
No.
So I don't consider them the same thing.
I almost called the wrong person's name, actually.
Chrissy.
Number 7, and this is the one that this question is to make it or break it if I decide to take part in this lifestyle. One of the main questions. How does leadership work with a polygamous family? Is there a hierarchy amongst the wives? Do different wives have different roles? As in, Christina, both of those, I'm going to use profanity. There's a video on YouTube that is called the bottom bitch theory. The bottom bitch is the main bitch. But the bottom bitch is the main wife. And all the other wives takes a back seat, or it's the bottom bitch is pretty much the captain of the wives, and all the other wives follow her orders.
Mm-hmm. Is there a main hoe and side hoes? Is what you're asking me. Okay, so here is my official stance on this. Okay, and there are terms for it in polygamy: head wife and basement wife. Those are actual terms that polygamists use. And so there are.
Wouldn't that about me again?
Head wife. The head wife, the top wife, the one who's in charge. Oh, boss lady. That's another one they use. They say boss lady for the wife who's the first wife and is in charge. And then there's a term, basement wife, and that is for the wife who's kind of at the bottom rung, and sometimes is hidden, and sometimes is a secret from the community, and sometimes does not have as great of a life because she's at the bottom of the totem pole. So it's very common, especially amongst Mormons. They have very hierarchical wife positions in most Mormon families, not all. I know a lot of Mormon families that are not like that, but I do know of some that are like that. And sometimes it's not even intentional. Sometimes one wife just has a strong ass personality, like she's an alpha female, and sometimes another wife is like really quiet, like doesn't really care. And in that case, I would say it's not abusive. But I think having a situation where the wives actually have a hierarchy amongst themselves is destructive. Someone gets hurt in that scenario. And I do not sign off on that or endorse that in any way. If I ever have another sister wife, I would want her to be my equal. I want her opinions and thoughts. I want everything that I've had, I want for her. And if you love someone, that's what you should want for someone you love and you care about. So ultimately, that is how we would be structured. If and when we ever find someone, I would want them to be an equal. That is not to say that equality is immediate. Okay. So we're not going to give the bank account to someone we just started dating, right? We're not going to put her on the $360,000 home we just bought, right? She's not going to be on the deed day one. Now, if someone's coming into my home, I want their financial stability to be assured. I would draft up some kind of trust with money if they ever wanted to leave. I wouldn't want them to feel trapped. I wouldn't want them to feel less. But I certainly wouldn't bring them in on huge financial assets until I have seen that they are fully invested in the family, are a wife, and aren't going anywhere. Because it takes time to build that kind of trust and loyalty. I wasn't on my husband's bank account right away when we met, right? Like, I didn't gain all those things until I was at least very close to becoming his wife. And I think the same is sort of true of a wife coming into a family. I want to treat my sister wife as an equal, but certain things, especially financial things, she would gain access over time. But yeah,
I'm still stuck. I'm still stuck on the basement wife comment, because that Chrissy, God forbid you and I got together or got married or what have you. I couldn't imagine going and saying, "Oh, this is my basement wife."
I don't think anybody introduces anyone as their basement wife. I think that it's just a term that people use for someone who's at the bottom totem pole, for someone who does not necessarily have equal rights in the marriage and sometimes is hidden in the basement. Nobody introduces someone as their basement wife. You feel me? It's just that they know that that's the position they're in based on how they're treated and how they feel. And I surely never want to make anyone feel like that.
All right.
And family. Sorry,
8.
I didn't answer the whole question. We talked about wife hierarchy, but I actually did not talk about, what was the very first line?
How does leadership work within a polygamous family?
So as far as leadership goes, in my family, I think that it would always have to be my husband, because that's kind of the balancer. If we're stuck on the fence about how do we make this decision, I would want to defer to him, because then I don't feel like my sister wife's choice is being chosen over mine, or my choice is chosen over hers. So the deciding factor, I think, kind of the tiebreaker, should always be the husband. So I'm always going to defer to what he decides. That's not going to be for every family. I think that certain families, like I said, if there's just a naturally very alpha female, and it works for them, maybe though one of the wives is the person who's that tiebreaker decision maker. That wouldn't work for me. I'm not ever gonna be led by a woman, like, ever. But if that works for someone else, I think it's okay. But I do think it's important to have a structure that's discussed amongst everybody and agreed amongst everybody. Hey, if we get in a situation where we're at an impasse and we can't decide who's the ultimate decision maker in that case, who is the tiebreaker person, I think it's an important conversation for a polygamist to have.
Me personally, this is my opinion. I'll answer.
Sorry.
No problem. You got family, you got to take care of the family. How I would, I don't know if you ever watched this old TV show called JAG. Judge Advocate General. I'll be the judge, and I'll let the wives act as prosecutor and defendant on whatever topic it is, and let them discuss it among themselves, and at the end, I'll come with my final conclusion. And I heard both arguments. Instead of me saying, "Oh, this is the law, my way, the highway,"
no, you have to take into consideration like what your spouses think. Of course, I don't think my husband would ever make a decision without asking me what I think or what my opinion is or present my thoughts and ideas. Yeah, and I think that's responsible. I think that's the right way to do it. I think you're right. You hear both people, and then
like I said, one thing I'm not saying I'm the strongest cook in the kitchen, but I feed off information of others. Yeah, I don't know if you noticed this about me since we met, but I feed off information of others. I don't just judge, "Oh, you're polygamous, screw you." Bye.
Right.
I want to sit there and learn.
When
I first heard about it, I went to the pastor. I went to other religious people, got information about it. Don't get me wrong, my pastor, who I still consider my mentor, strongly against the topic of polygamy, but that's a whole different story. He's always
going to be if he's conditioned to think that way.
But like I was saying, I know for a fact I'm not the strongest chef in the kitchen, strong cook in the kitchen. So I need to be able to rely on my prep cook or my wife number one, wife number two, get their inputs on it and learn from them. Just because I'm a man, because I have a pair of testes and a penis, doesn't mean I get to learn the whole show.
It doesn't make you a perfect thinker, right? Like, yeah. I feel like if a husband marries someone, right, if you take someone as a wife, one person, two people, however many, it's because you value their thoughts and their opinion and their mind and their heart and how they make decisions and how they think. So to not listen to those things and not take those things into consideration would kind of be like shooting your own foot off. Like, you brought them into your life because you trust them. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think it takes all the wheels. Again, like 3 heads are better than one. If I've got 3 people who can think through a problem, why would I not want to hear all of those people's opinion? Because maybe one of them has a solution I haven't thought of. Or maybe together discussing, we're going to come up with something we wouldn't have come up with otherwise.
All right, number 8. And this one, I'm pretty sure you're going to get some flack from your polygamy community for this one. Do wives have romantic relationships within the plural marriage?
I would say that is really, there are 1,000 different variations of what that looks like. There are polygamous relationships with just women and no men, where there's 3 women married to each other that are lesbians. Like, that's a thing. That's a type of polyfidelitous triad that exists, right? So, like, of course, they have romantic relationships. And there are non-religious people who enter polygamous marriages because they're bisexual. And they want to be able to meet those needs and desires. So yeah, those people have relationships. It becomes more complex when we're talking about within the religious community, are there women that have romantic relationships? And the answer is absolutely yes. There are women who have romantic relationships that are not sexual, that hold hands, that cuddle, that go on dates, that spend time with one another and don't have sexual relationships. There are women who have sexual relationships with their husband present, but they focus on the husband and they don't really do anything together. There are women who have fully functioning, independent sexual relationships together, even in a religious marriage. I know families that operate that way. And scripturally, there's a lot of argument about it, but from what I have found and what many people in the community agree with me is there is nothing that condemns sensuality/sexuality between women. That the scriptures about homosexuality in the Bible are really directed towards male homosexuality and sodomy, and that the only scripture about women is one referring to not replacing the natural function, meaning childbearing and having a man in the picture. So the thinking for those Christian polygamists who do have romantic and sexual relationships between the wives is that as long as they have a husband and that they do not set aside his natural use, they are not replacing him with one another, that it is permissible. That is their take on it. I'm probably somewhere on the fence. I can't find anything that condemns wives from being physical with one another. But there's nothing that says yes, they can either. It's kind of a undefined thing. So I would say it is up to the leadership of the husband in that situation, because he's the one ultimately who would answer to God for whatever decision he makes. So I would defer to the husband's leadership on that. Yeah.
What I was leading to with that question was, I'm glad you answered like that. My question is, let's say husband A is married to two women, and of course he has relations with both women sexually. But what happens if both these two women, while still married to said husband, have a relationship between with each other? So they're still married to husband sexually, biblically, whatever, but also have their own sexual thing going on between those two.
So what would happen? I don't know what that. So the question is like, what happens in that scenario? I guess I would say, what is the predetermined agreement in the relationship? So I would probably say, sorry, I'm just adjusting, getting more comfortable. I would say that it's whatever they've agreed on. If they have discussed with their husband that that's part of their relationship format, I would say it's fine. If they've had a discussion that that's not their relationship format and they're doing it behind their husband's back, then we're, I guess, treading into the territory of cheating.
Which leads into my second question.
Yeah, I think anytime you're doing something that's not discussed and agreed upon, that you're being not completely faithful, or you're cheating. So I think it's fine if it's something that's discussed and agreed upon, but if it's not, then it's cheating. Yeah. Go ahead. Next one.
Before I go to number 9, I'm going to give you my take on it. For me, if, let's say I'm in this situation and we're all in the same house, as long as it's between the three of us, I don't care. If you two ladies want to have your little thing while we're still in a marriage relationship, have at it. I'm not going to...
And that's how a lot of men feel, that that's fine. But I guess that if somebody hadn't discussed it, or if the husband didn't know, that it might seem deceitful.
No, I'm saying like I would go into the relationship saying that. Like, if you two
saying that.
have,
Yeah, absolutely. Have at it. Yeah.
So for me, as long as it's not someone outside the family, and you two want to have a thing,
Right.
maybe a one-nighter or something steady going on while we're all three together, have at it. Maybe I'm at work and I'm doing a podcast like I'm doing now. You guys want to do a little thing together. I'm not going to stop you. Which leads into question number 9. Within polygamy, is it possible for individuals in the family to quote unquote cheat or commit acts of unfaithfulness?
Okay, so I'm gonna define both a little differently. I think an act of unfaithfulness, it doesn't take very much to commit an act of unfaithfulness. If you are in a relationship with a girl, like just a monogamous, you're dating a girl, she's your girlfriend, and you hop on Tinder behind her back and start swiping, even if you don't meet anyone, even if you don't even have a singular conversation, the act of downloading the app and swiping, I think, is an act of unfaithfulness. I think anything you do behind your significant other's back is an act of unfaithfulness. I don't necessarily think that's cheating, but I think it's an act of unfaithfulness. You have violated their trust by doing something behind their back without their knowledge and without their consent. So, like, you're engaged to a chick and you flirt with your ex, you committed an act of unfaithfulness. You didn't cheat, but you were not faithful to your significant other. I would go so far as to say you can't control your dreams, right? You can't control like a fleeting thought. You see a chick and you have a fleeting thought that like you might want to get down with her. You can't control that kind of fleeting thought. But I would say even frequently thinking about intimacy with another individual or frequent thinking about another individual without the consent of your significant other, even that is an act of unfaithfulness. You have betrayed them in your mind and in your heart. So I think it's really easy for people to commit acts of unfaithfulness. And I would say within a polygamous family, that would be anything that you do that your spouse or spouses has not agreed to, has not said, I'm okay with this and this is how we're going to do things. And that may be, for some people, dating separately to find the wife might be okay. Well, it's okay for Christy to talk to chicks, or it's okay for Elle to talk to chicks, to meet someone that'll be a good fit. That might be okay in some families. And in some families, no, we date everyone together. So going outside of that and dating someone alone would be an act of unfaithfulness. Anything that you do that your partner's not agreed to, I think is an act of unfaithfulness. And as soon as you act on it with your body, now you've cheated. It's kind of how I see it. So your wife says, yeah, you know what? I want to do this polygamy thing. I want to try. Okay. And you go and she says, but I just don't feel comfortable yet with you dating alone. It scares me. This is new to me, blah, blah, blah. I want to know who you're talking to, what you're talking about. Do I think maybe she's being a little too encroaching? Do I think maybe she needs to dial it back? Yes. But if you say, okay, honey, because you want her to agree to polygamy, you go, yeah, honey, that's fine. I'll show you all my conversations. We'll date together. But then you start talking to some chick without her knowing. Act of unfaithfulness. Now you go out and you meet the chick and you kiss her, you cheated. Even though she's given you permission to be a polygamist, doesn't mean you can do things behind her back. So that's where I think the line is you have to be faithful to whatever their relationship agreements are. And I think that's why it's so important to talk about all the details. I know people who are like, my husband could go out and marry another chick without my permission because I think he has the right to do it. I'm not that chick. If Elle brought some chick home and said, this is your new sister wife, I'd be like, she's getting a new ass whipping. So it's, everyone structures it differently and everybody has different agreements. For us, we're not so intense as we have to talk to everyone simultaneously together. But like, if we find that somebody might be a good match, we should both be talking to that person, both kind of screening them if they're a good fit. And then from then, if we decided to meet that person, we would be meeting them together. If he suddenly came home and said, you know, I met this chick online, I've been talking to her for a month, and I just met her at Starbucks, I'd be like, what the hell? Like, why is this person hearing about it? Because that's not what our relationship agreement is. So I think the details about cheating are what your relationship agreement is. I know polygamous women who are like, my husband can go be with anybody anytime he wants. And if that's their relationship agreement, then more power to them.
All right. I could see a point on that. I might come back to number 9, actually. I don't have a question for that one yet. Number 10. Do plural spouses share a bedroom or a marriage bed? How is time with the husband shared for intimacy and otherwise?
So again, there is everything on the spectrum, from completely separate everything to completely together everything. There are families that are so separate that they live in different towns, and the husband drives to different towns, and the wives rarely, if ever, see one another, and have very little relationship with one another. And there are families that live in the same home, that share the same bedroom, that share the same bed, that share the same intimate time, and that share all the same dates, all the same vacations, that they do literally everything together. Somewhere in the middle there is what I would say is the most common, which is one home, separate bedrooms that the husband alternates every other night in between rooms. And sometimes they might have time together. They might have some dates together, some dates apart. It's kind of like a mixed bag. So you've got every extreme on the entire spectrum, from completely separate all of the time to completely together all the time, and like every single variant in between.
I can see that. I mean, me personally, because of my epilepsy, I will have to say same house. Because A, gas is going up, and B, going to different towns, different houses, and different real estates.
Crazy. Crazy. I could never. I could never do that.
And this one, I don't know why I put this on. Well, because I'm not the jealous type, even though I've been called that a few times. Do you become jealous or experience negative emotions? How do you handle those feelings?
So, I think anyone who says they don't get jealous sometimes.
Before you answer the question, and now I know why I answered it. There's something you said to me in the past that made me bring that one up, but go on.
So I think jealousy is a really natural emotion. I think it's a thing that human beings feel. I think sometimes it's a healthy jealousy because when someone is yours, right, belongs to you, like a spouse or a child, sometimes that jealousy is almost protective. And as long as you're not controlling their lives, I think that jealousy sometimes can be okay, can be normal. For some people, jealousy becomes consuming, and it's all they think about, and it's all they act on, and it's all that motivates them. feeling jealous. She gets more than me. He gets more attention than me. She gets more things than me. She gets more time than me. She gets more gifts than me. She gets more, and it becomes, I have some polygamous friends, they call it bean counting, where you're counting every single bean your sister wife gets to make sure you get the same exact number of beans. Instead of focusing on how you feel as an individual. Do you feel loved? Do you feel wanted? Do you feel important? Do you feel present? Those are the things we should be thinking about. And I think the only time that jealousy is justified is if you're not getting those needs met. And I think that's why we have scriptures that sit in multiple texts in the Quran and in the Bible that say you can't take things away from your first wife if you have second. You have to treat them fairly, justly. I think that's why we have that. Because I think that God knows us, our souls, and knows that jealousy is a natural feeling, a normal feeling. And the thing that mitigates jealousy is justice, being treated fairly, being loved fairly. Equality is not the thing. Because just because my sister wife gets flowers, I might not want flowers. I don't like flowers. And she might not like candy, but I sure do. So I don't necessarily want equality, but I want to feel loved and important. I want to feel valued. And the only time that I have felt jealousy personally is when I haven't been treated that way. And I think that that's a normal way to feel. So I think the burden is on not the person feeling the jealousy. In those cases, if a person's feeling jealous because their needs aren't being met, the burden is on the other person to try to figure it out, to care enough to figure out why your partner doesn't feel loved, for it to be important enough to fix. And if it's not, it might not be a relationship that will live. And then if the jealousy is not just, if you're bean counting, if you're just feeling envious and angry and obsessed with jealousy, then you have to start reflecting on yourself, because you'll destroy your family and you'll destroy yourself. And I think that's in polygamy and monogamy. And heck, I've seen friends get jealous of other friends because jealousy is such a normal human emotion. I think the answer to it is questioning, is this normal? Is this healthy? Is this me? Can this be fixed? And working on it.
I love the way how you just shut me up without me even saying a word.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, because something back, I'm not going to say when, but a while back, someone you were aware for a while back, because we had multiple competitions since 2013. And I won't say who it was. I know you know who I'm referring to. Treated you like dog poop. And you wouldn't stop complaining about it one bit. Mm-hmm. And that's who I was leading toward. And you answered to a T. And that's why I brought that question up. I remember those conversations, and I remember how you felt. Yeah.
And I've realized now that I am better treated or better loved, what the difference looks like, what the difference feels like. If you are loved appropriately, if you are treated fairly, those feelings of jealousy, they don't really happen, because there's no space for you to feel unloved or unwanted or afraid. All of those feelings crop up when someone's not getting what they need, or when they're getting treated badly. Although some people just get jealous, obsessed with jealousy. And that is for the individual to fix, and some individuals just absolutely cannot do polygamy because of that. And they know that. I have met people who go, I don't think there's anything wrong with polygamy. I see the benefits of polygamy. Shit, I wish I had somebody to share the responsibilities of being a woman. But I'm too jealous of a person, and I know it would tear me up and tear them up. And you know what? I think it's wonderful if someone knows themselves well enough to say what they're capable of and not capable of. Like, I think that's a healthy, good thing. Self-awareness.
All right, number 12, which I have an idea of what the answer is, but I'll let you, the expert, answer it. Is marriage a requirement of a polygamous relationship?
So I would say that depends on your format. If you're just a polyamorous, then like it's just a revolving door of people. If you are in a committed relationship but you don't want a marital format, then you don't need to be married. I would say if you're looking to create a plural marriage, that is to say multiple spouses, yes, marriage is the absolute requirement because you can't be married without being married. You can't have a forever commitment, right, without the marriage part. And my argument there is that because there are a lot of people who are like, wait, I've been with my significant other for 20 years and we're not married. I would argue they are married. So legal marriage to me is nothing but a piece of paper. It only first started being practiced back in like 1910, and it was a way for our government to tax us. That is literally what a marriage license is. Your government telling you whether or not you have the right to be married, which is absurd. And if we say that only legally sanctioned marriages are actual marriages, then what are we saying about all of the times where legal marriage didn't exist earlier in the American story and earlier in the human story? Are we saying that religious marriages are not valid? Are we saying that certificate given by your pastor is invalid? Are we saying that those slaves that jumped over the broom, that their marriages aren't real? And that's dangerous, dangerous things to say. So I believe the requirement to marriage is to be committed and to believe that that is your forever spouse. That is all. No one has to say you're married. No one has to see you get married. No one has to acknowledge your marriage. No one has, just you and your spouse. So yes, I think marriage is essential to marriage, but not necessarily a legal marriage. I believe a legal marriage is only a piece of paper if you need it. I'm legally married to my husband. He needed it for a number of reasons. Some people need it for insurance. Some people need it for other financial purposes. So we are legally married. But I don't think the paper is what made us married. I think we were married long before we actually got a marriage license.
All right. This is another one that, and after I get audience, the more you guys know, after question number 3, this is the last question. I'm going to have a few stuff I'm going to say to Christy on the podcast, so it will remain on air, just forewarning. How are the legalities of multiple marriages and assets managed?
Okay. So it kind of is a tack on the previous question, because in terms of multiple marriages, so right, having multiple licenses, marriage licenses in the United States is not legal. Having multiple marriage licenses is considered bigamy. And that's really just because they don't have systems in place to keep track of those marriages. There isn't a way to claim 2 spouses on your taxes. We're not formatted, right, for plural marriage. So that's why only one legal marriage is allowed. So many people are married legally to their first wife, and then they have spiritual marriages to their second wife, which is basically what I was just talking about. The belief that you are in fact married is enough to be married, to be living as a wife and husband together. You're married. And some people, that's all they do. They go, we're married now, hooray, let's go bang it out. Some people have a ceremony. Some people have a get together with just a few folks. Some people have their pastor from maybe their polygamous group or church marry them. But it's not a legal marriage in terms of there's no license registered with the government for which they're taxing you for. It's a real marriage. It's just there's no paper document for it. And as far as that goes, there's even some families where the husband doesn't marry any of the wives. I know a family, the husband's not married to the first or the second on paper. He had ceremonies with both, he had commitments to both, and then he had a ceremony with both together, just to kind of like symbolize the marriage of the three as a family. But there's no legal document for any of them. I also know families where the husband divorced the first wife on paper. He's still spiritually married to her, still living as her husband, still in the same home, sleeping together, all that. But he legally divorced her and married the second or even third or even fourth. I know a family where he married the fourth wife for a legal purpose, whether that was to adopt her children or so she could have insurance because she's got cancer, or so she could get papers to come into the United States. Sometimes who is married, I've even seen the wives both be married legally on paper to each other so they both could have health insurance to have babies. Because the husband didn't need it, he was young, they did. So they got married and they both were able to be insured. So for most polygamists, the legal marriage portion is really shuffled around based on who it benefits and why. Because that's all it is, our government taxing us. So in turn, let's use it to our advantage however we need to. And then any other marriages are spiritually based marriages, which all marriages are spiritually based, right? Like even if you have a legal marriage, unless you just have a green card marriage and you're not really in love with the person you're married to, all legal marriages also are spiritual marriages. So they're legal marriages and spiritual marriages at the same time. So even for a monogamous person. And then as far as assets and legalities go, gosh, there's so many ways to finagle it. But what I see pretty often is, again, like both wives will be on a deed together for, like, say, the house, so that the husband can't just take off with one wife and screw the other wife out of the house. So, right, if like first wife and second wife are both on the deed, then if one wants to leave, or if husband and second wife decide to be together and leave the first wife, her portion of that house is secured. They'd have to buy her out in order to leave, or she'd have to buy them out in order to leave. Whereas, you know, if it's the husband and the wife who are deeded on that home, one person's portion of that is not protected. So that's kind of how I see it a lot, where they'll put two wives on something as opposed to a husband. I've also seen a lot of like trusts set up for children as, you know, the parents age, to ensure that everyone is left something, using wills in creative ways. Like there's a ton of ways to do it. Luckily, I do know a polygamist who's also a lawyer, so he's really great at like navigating those waters. But there are a lot of ways to figure out the financial part.
All right, number 14 for the closing. From your experience, what tips or advice would you offer for anyone interested in a plural relationship for themselves?
So the first thing I'm going to say, and I don't want it to sound disheartening, is to say that a lot of plural marriages don't work. A lot of plural marriages are not very fulfilling after people figure out maybe it isn't what they really wanted. And a lot of people who are actually current polygamists say, oh, I would never advise polygamy anymore. So I encourage polygamy with a huge warning sticker. I would say if you think you want to pursue this lifestyle, to one, reflect on how truly deeply committed to it are you. Are you going to run when things get tough? Or are you going to stick to it? Do you have a good track record of sticking through things, even when things have gotten tough with your husband or your wife? Have you been resilient when you have been tested? Because you will be tested on something or other. The other thing I would say is question yourself about what your motivation for polygamy is. I think that most people who fail at polygamy fail because of their motivations. And I would say, so my failed plural marriage, it's really difficult and painful for me to say, because I did at one point very much love my first husband, but he did not love me as much as I loved him. And I presented polygamy as a solution to that. I thought that if he could be with someone else that he loved, that at least he wouldn't leave me. And really what wound up happening was he found someone who didn't have as good of motivations as me. That is to say, her motivation was and this is a quote, all she wanted was him and she didn't care. Another quote was that me and my son were a necessary inconvenience. So if your motivation is just because you want the husband, or your motivation is just because you want another wife, then you're not committed to the plural marriage itself. And it gets easy to walk. It also gets easy to manipulate the world to be what you want it to be, which is basically what my sister wife did. So that's why I say reflect on what your motivation is. I've seen failed plural marriages because people are too desperate. I want to be a polygamist so bad that I will accept the very first person who comes. And she comes and she's a drug addict. I have seen that more than once, more than twice, more than thrice. I've seen someone who even wound up marrying a prostitute. That's how desperate to be a polygamist this family was I will accept anyone if they have a pulse and a vagina. Like, those were the only requirements. Well, then you're inviting terrible things into your home, and terrible things are going to happen. So the other thing I would say is, don't be desperate. Don't be desperate to be a polygamist. The other thing that can't motivate you. So I would say if you're a first wife, your motivation cannot be, I just want to make my husband happy. Your motivation can't be, I can't handle my 16 kids by myself. Your motivation has to be, you really want a plural marriage and a sister wife, because that's the only way you're going to see it through, no matter how hard it is. If you're a second wife, your motivation can't be, I just want that man. Your motivation can't be, I can't have my own kids and I just want to have theirs. Your motivation can't be, I can't handle my own life because I'm addicted to drugs, or because I have health problems and I need someone to take care of me. Because at some point, that motivation's not going to be enough when times get hard. Your motivation has to be, I want to be in a polygamous relationship with a polygamous man and a sister wife. And the same applies to the husband. Your motivation can't be, I'm bored with my wife. Your motivation can't be, I want a new piece of ass. Your motivation can't be, it strokes my ego to have 2 women. Your motivation can't be anything other than, I believe polygamy will be good for my family, for my children, for my wife, for myself. And I'm committed to seeing that to its end. That's the only way it's going to last. All 3 people have to have the right motivations for polygamy to work. So I think that the biggest thing, if you're thinking about it, is think about what your motivation is. It's okay to be benefited by it. It's okay if polygamy makes your life easier. But it's really important for the motivation to be righteous. Otherwise, you're just really not going to follow through to the end result. You're not going to be able to go through the hard times. And you will likely choose someone who's not a healthy fit. Where I stand with my husband at this point, I would love to meet someone with the right motivation. I would love to meet someone who personality-wise is a good fit for us. I am unwilling to settle for anything less than that. And so is my husband. We are ridiculously happy in our marriage. So we're not going to bring anything that's destructive. But that also means we're also not going to accept anything less than what's right for us. That doesn't mean I want to create a sister wife like a Barbie doll. But at least her motivations and her ethics and morals have to fit our family, or we just We don't need someone else. We're happy just the way we are. Would it be nice if we met the right person? Absolutely. But I think that's how everyone should be. They should be okay and be happy and be stable in the relationship that they have. If you are thinking polygamy to fulfill any deficits that you have in your current relationship, it's just not good. It puts you in a really weird footing. So I think like just really, 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 really deep thought into what your motivations are, and a lot of patience are the keys to successful polygamous lifestyle.
I'm going to ask you a question. The person,
Yeah.
I have an idea who it was, H-E-R,
Yeah.
that made a comment about you and your son. How did a fight not start once those words were said?
So I heard it secondhand was the first thing. She didn't say that directly to me. And I believed that it was my husband's job to correct her. And I believed it was my husband's job to protect me from someone who thought like that.
Wow, I mean, and Christy, I know you a little longer than she did.
Yeah.
But, I mean, don't get me wrong, and I'll say this in front of your husband's face. I'd be lying if I didn't. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a crush on you even before on this. Be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know for a fact that if I made the wrong comment or the wrong suggestion or just shook your hand the wrong way, I wouldn't have a job.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was protective of me with everyone except for her.
No, I'm not referring to him. No, I'm not referring to him.
Oh, you mean me? Yeah, I'd have fought you. Yeah. And yeah, you have no idea the amount of self-control that woman put me through. Because really, there were many times she pushed me beyond the brink. I mean, there was one time, and I was heavily pregnant with my second child, and she was screaming in my face to hit her. And I was like, girl, if I had not grown as a person. So yeah, I mean, but I have grown a lot and changed a lot as a person. And for me, in that situation, when she said those words, and she said those words to him, so when I told my current husband that, he was like, the second any woman ever said anything like that about my wife or son, ever, I would never speak to them again. Never. Because that shows the quality of their character. It's not there. The ethics and the morals required for this lifestyle, the love required for this lifestyle, it's not there. That statement alone is enough proof. He's like, I would be done with that person from that moment. And that's what that's what my ex-husband should have done. My ex-husband should have, in that moment, said, absolutely not. Like, this is not going to happen. And he didn't. And now we know the outcome.
Chrissy, I know this.
So discernment. That's the key.
Chrissy, I know there's a lot of bleeping with the video. Let me edit what I said. I just realized why I said may have come up a little GAY. What I said was back before you and Andres got together, I would be lying if I said I didn't have a little CRUSH on you. You took it as I meant.
I didn't think it was on someone else. I didn't think it was on Andres.
I'm like, whoa, why do I have a crush on me?
No, I didn't take it like that. No. But yeah, I mean, I think that kind of leads to like the other thing that's so important if you choose to do this is discernment. Being able to tell when someone says something to you, when someone reveals something about themselves, not just looking for the best in people, which is important, but also looking at what they're really telling you. Are they telling you they're a good fit for this? Are they telling you they really want this? Are they telling you something more, something nefarious underneath their words about their motivations? So that's the great thing about my current husband. He catches things that I don't catch. Like, did you hear what that girl said? Or like, did you see what she did? Like, that's not good. I don't like that. Like, he'll notice things that I would just over my head. But that's because his mindset is, I want like a healthy, happy, unified, safe family. And I just won't let anything jeopardize that.
Before I go to number 15, I have, how do I put this kindly? Besides the crush comment, which borderline joking because I know you're married right now, but I also have a confession to make.
Forever married.
No.
This is the last husband I will ever have. Must die married to this one.
Okay. For those of you who don't know me and Chrissy's history, which, Chrissy, I'm not going to go in full detail because there's nothing physical with me and Chrissy. I'm going to get that out the way bluntly, just so that the audience knows.
Yeah, I'm like eyebrowing, like history.
Okay. So, a friend of ours got married, and the year before that marriage happened, I was going through a breakup. The person who was getting married really encouraged me to go to the bachelor party. Unbeknownst to everyone else at the bachelor party, I'm still a little depressed with the whole breakup thing or what have you. Got there, got drunk, met Chrissy's sister wife there. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know they were sister wives. Got a little drunk, and
they weren't married yet, by the way. She was just dating Andres then. So she was Andres' girlfriend, basically.
Chrissy, what I'm about to say, if you take this offensively, I told you this pre-production, so you know this part already. I got drunk at the bachelor party and thought this sister wife was the finest thing since God made wine. Got to the wedding that Saturday, saw what she actually looked like, and almost barfed.
You had beer goggles on, man.
Jesus
well, listen,
Christ.
so my current husband sees her, like when we exchange the kids and stuff, and he's like, ooh. And I was like, well, like she used to be kind of cute. Like, look. And he was like, no, she wasn't. I'm like, oh, okay. So you're not alone.
I'm not going to say your first husband's name. But we got to an hour before the wedding, and I kind of still didn't know that was his future sister wife, of course. First husband confronts me and says, stop hitting on, I'm not going to say that woman's name. And in my mind, he's married to you. So him defending this chick's honor, I'm like, bro, if you, I was going to fight him at the wedding. If your son hadn't walked in when he did, I literally would have clocked him.
Well,
your son walked in and needed help with It sounds like, Daddy, I need help with a tie or something. He ran like, so if your son hadn't walked in, I would have clocked him.
Fought my ex-husband for defending his future wife's honor. Because you didn't know. It's a good story.
Oh, I didn't. So
it's a good story.
So 6 months down the road, I felt kind of heavy about this altercation. Told Chrissy this, kind of snitching. Because I thought that Chrissy needed to know that her husband was being unfaithful. So in case something did happen, she had an idea. Chrissy goes,
which good looking out. No, good looking out.
Something to, oh, you're welcome. Something to affect, brother, you didn't know? And I'm like, didn't know what? We're polygamous. I'm like, I was going to say, bitch, you're what? But I'm like, what? We're polygamous. And from that day on, I was still going to, what's the word? When you can't sleep, insomnia. So every night, me and Chrissy were talking for the next 5 months. I knew literally of Christy's entire marriage situation going forward. So a lot of stuff she talked about in this interview, I kind of had a pre-knowledge of it. A, because it helped me sleep at night, no disrespect. But B, I was able to help you going through what you're going through. And I'm not going to lie to you. I kind of saw you two breaking up way before you two actually broke up.
You're the only one. Never, ever, never, never, never. So you're the only one who called it. You should have placed bets on that one.
Okay, physically, without the head, without her head being decapitated, fine. So once she gets to her face, yeah, I couldn't do that with a paper bag over her head.
Weird again.
But as for me, I'm not going to lie to you. The only reason I never pursued this type of relationship, you're sideways. Oh, shoot. Sorry, guys, technical difficulties. Well, that concludes our interview for tonight. I guess that's it. I'll try and get closing arguments. Yeah,
so the phone was doing that weird, like, lagging thing really bad again. I had to, like,
okay.
Yeah, I had to, like, leave the file and come back. So, yes,
like I was saying,
arguments.
Before I get to closing arguments, I'm not going to lie to you. Back when 014, I did talk to my pastor about it, who I won't say his name, and he did suggest me not going to this route because it's whole sin. And I think he was the one that brought up that it's part of the Old Testament and not the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Which, after moving to Haiti, I kind of realized, hold up. Even if it's in the Old Testament, if it's not good, why is
still
it
the Bible?
Just as good? Why is it still as a good thing in the Old Testament, but New Testament is a bad thing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it made no sense to me. Now, having this discussion
specifically without there being any dialogue about it, right? if there had been some dialogue, if Jesus had told Paul, hey, Paul, like, no more polygamous marriage anymore, like, you know, or Paul had said in the letters to the Corinthians, like, hey, guys, no more plural marriage, then I could understand that argument. Oh, well, that was the Old Testament, but not the New Testament. But since nothing changed, they didn't need to say anything about it.
Which leads me to tonight. I'm not gonna lie, before this interview, when I first suggested this interview to Chrissy, I was on the fence of whether or not I should become polygamous. Mm-hmm. After what I learned tonight, I'd be lying if I said, if I do tie a knot with a woman, and I won't bring it up myself, but if she brings it up, I'll be all for it.
I would definitely say, I think it's a positive thing that it's something that you would be open to. But I would say definitely, if you ever actually get there, make sure you are a master at monogamy first, that you have a rock solid marriage, and that you proceed with caution. I think it could be wonderful, you know, if it's done right, but that doesn't always happen. So you should definitely, anyone considering polygamy, please proceed with caution.
And I'll give you a short story, Christy. I was in Hayden. This is back in 2018. My dad's place is on top of my place. So I went upstairs just to check on how he was doing. Check on how he's doing one night.
Yes, to check on how he's doing, yeah.
So he's watching this documentary on polygamy on BBC, that British broadcast central, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
So I sat in front of him and so watching it. He nonchalantly goes something to the effect of, Gregor, why don't you start something like this? And me thinking he's being sarcastic, I kind of looked back and looked at him for a good 20 seconds. And he goes, I'm like, Dad, I couldn't afford it. Well, it's not about can you afford it. If you want multiple women, how bad it? I won't judge you for it. I'm like, Dad, you need to tell me with a straight face. And he had a straight face as it comes. You need to tell me if I had 2 or 3 wives in one house. You don't say anything wrong with it. You could have 100 wives in one house. I want to give it an F.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, family should support you, right? As long as you're not hurting anyone.
So, in closing, Christy, you have any closing thoughts or comments?
Not really. I do want to, like, I guess kind of put a little disclaimer on the fact that I started out very, like, positive, and then I was kind of like very, be careful in polygamy. It can fuck you up. You can fuck it up. Like, be careful. I just want to say, like, that's just because of the nature of those questions. Like, I do think that it can be a beautiful lifestyle with a lot of wonderful benefits. And that, like, with the right combination of individuals, that I think, like, it can work swimmingly well. And I do know of some examples of families like that. The cautions are just more about doing it responsibly and ethically. As I think people should do everything. I think that in monogamy, people should be responsible and ethical. I think in being single, people should be responsible and ethical. So my kind of last thing to say is same with polygamy, that I think being responsible and being ethical and using a good, solid moral compass in whatever lifestyle you choose is kind of what should guide you.
For me, I mean, this is a great, I mean, it came out better than I expected. I'll give this thing for like a 9.5 out of 10, even if there's few glitches you had here and there. Um, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, people might hate me for saying this, but you really did do a great job changing my viewpoint on polygamy. And this is what, not just for me, but something I wanted to do for the audience so they can actually learn of this lifestyle or this format. Because, like I said, I've lived in Haiti for a few years. I've seen married men have women on the side, left and right, and it was like more than sugar, it mixed well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if that person wants to deal with their life, have at it. Someone wants to be part of the LGBTQ community, that's on them. Like I was telling my boss not my boss, but a friend of mine at work the other day. Why is it okay to be gay nowadays? Fine. But the minute you bring up multiple wives or multiple spouses in the conversation, oh no, that's a sin, blah blah.
Mm-hmm. I think that, well, number one, I actually think the LGBTQ community is an ally for us in this situation. And I think that's because of the crossover. There are gay people who are poly. There are bisexual people who are poly. And having that crossover, okay, being gay is okay, and being gay and married is okay. And hey, there's this crossover with poly. I think that helps us. Because I believe that plural marriage is the final civil rights frontier. The right for all people, even multiple people, to be married, as long as they're not harming or abusing or hurting or coercing anyone. I think that's the final civil rights frontier. And don't get me wrong, we still have a lot of work on other civil rights areas like race and ethnicity and social injustice and economic, unfairness. But I do think that we need to progress in rights for polygamists too.
Yes, and I believe not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, I would have a post-interview live stream with Michelle talking about the discussion. If you need to contact Chrissy, please contact on her Facebook Messenger. I'm not going to give her number, if that's personal.
No.
But
yeah,
I don't
people
think
can
her
contact
husband approve of that. And like I said, I came at this non-judgmental viewpoint, kind of curious, and I'm not going to lie. Hey, if I have a woman in my life and I'm married, and I get married, I'm probably a second woman that I want to have like a sister wife type of thing. Me from 2014 and me 2022, 2014 when I said no, 2022, after this discussion with Christy, I'm going to say yes. And I'm a proud Baptist since 2007. So if I could change my mind, well, maybe you can. And if you want to learn more, do research, talk to Christy, and maybe she could teach you, give you some more advice on it. But as far as me,
I have books
I'm
I
not
can
saying,
lend out. Well,
I'm not saying that I'm looking for a polygamous marriage right now. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I'm
you're open to it as a lifestyle.
Yes. As in me with multiple women, not me and multiple guys. Yep. For the
record. Same.
So, Chrissy, say hi to your family and tell, what's his name again? Hubby?
Oh, Lewis? Yeah.
Tell him I said hi and...
Yeah.
Tell him I said hi. Thank you for allowing me to do this interview with you.
Yeah.
And have a good night.
Thanks. You too. Thank you for interviewing.
Have a good night, guys.
Night.
No problem. Night.